my parents were ordained Baptist ministers. They were American Baptists, which is now Southern Baptist. So it was a little bit more, progressive Baptist, I guess, whatever you would call it. But yeah, I was raised a preacher's kid, and I always admired my dad, and of course loved him very much, and I wanted very much to be like my dad. And so I think in high school I began thinking maybe I should be a minister, and so I was a philosophy major at Davidson for about a year and a half, and then I took a course in the philosophy department in Logic 101. I went into theater arts. Originally, I went into theater to become a better preacher. I thought, you hear a lot of preachers who could use some theater arts, right? And so I thought, well, I'll study some theater, and that'll make me a better preacher. And then I began to meet theater people, and got excited about the theater. In theater, I got into musical theater, and studied voice in college. My mother always sang around the house. She loved to sing, and my dad was very musical. We had a family band growing up, and all my brothers sang. I grew up with 3 brothers, 4 guys, no sisters. So I, after college, being a theater arts major, I went to New York and tried to get into musical theater. And I got very lucky. When I first went to New York in 63, the fall of 63, I think I stood out because I was from Davidson University in the Midwest. I was very unique, and I was clean cut and all-American, and I was different from the other kids who were auditioning, and I got into a musical right away with Bert Lahr, who was the Cowardly Lion. I played the juvenile lead on Broadway in a David Merritt show called Foxy, and a television producer saw me in that show, and that's how my career started.
When I started playing music, I started playing the bass, and my dad kind of got me started, and it was like he was a jazz player and he was schooling me in that realm, which I didn't totally understand quite yet, but I'm learning the instrument. And then, but I was listening to all this other stuff that was going on, and I got into the whole progressive rock thing, Yes, and King Crimson, and then to me, it was like, I really admired the technical facility of these players, and that's where I saw that and jazz sort of merging, because these are rock players using jazz sensibility and techniques, and they're playing this music that I would go to see them in concert, and I was like blown away. And then that started speaking to me as a player. So then I started pursuing that kind of area, which led me to really studying jazz, and I listened to all the jazz, and then I got into that. By the time I was out of high school, went back and listened to all the old jazz records, and Coltrane, Miles Davis, and Duke Ellington, and I started immersing myself in that, because all of a sudden I'm thinking about, well, maybe I want to play this music, because my dad plays it. I'm starting to understand what he was doing musically. So it was a very interesting period for me. So instead of going to college or university, I went to the University of Jimmy Merritt. That's what I tell people. That's my dad. I went to the school of Jimmy Merritt, and he got me started, and he showed me his original music, and he showed me like some techniques of how to engage myself, to learn, to get more technique in order to play his own music. And I kind of rooted myself in that for a while when I was sort of my post-high school era. And then I was listening to everything. I was influenced by so many things I heard. As a little kid, we went to see this movie, Spartacus. And the soundtrack of that movie musically was like, wow, it's incredible. I mean, watching this incredible story unfold in front of me, and this music is just making it's resonated with me. So then I was really interested in hearing like what people did on TV shows and movies in terms of scoring, underscoring, and themes, and that kind of like got my ear. So all these influences kind of swirl around. So by the time I got to playing music as a professional endeavor, when I got to New York, that was like sort of like in the 80s. And then I was really kind of casting about, trying to find what was I gonna latch on to.
Well, the Beatles hit, and everybody wanted a guitar, and I liked the Beatles. But then I heard Dylan, and I got into Dylan songs, and through high school, I was pretty much a hootenanny strummer. I played with friends and stuff. I got to college and I could sing reasonably well, or well enough. I was willing to sing. So I met some guys who wanted to start a band and they were looking for a singer. And I said, I'll do it. So in that band, I just banged on an acoustic guitar, which was rarely audible, unfortunately. That's probably why I switched to electric. I got tired of being drowned out. But so I was their singer. And that band, it was a good little band. It was here at Dartmouth, actually, because that's where I went to college. But I decided I wanted to be a musician. So I left school and went back out west where I was from and formed bands, and eventually went from Albuquerque, which is where I went to high school. That's where I returned to and started playing in Albuquerque and played there for 5 or 8 years, and then figured, okay, I'll go to LA and the world will beat a path to my door. So I went to LA, and to my amazement, the world didn't beat a path to my door, but I had a great time out there and met a lot of fascinating people and played in bands and, you know, wrote songs. And then 10 years later, I decided, I think I'm done with LA. And that's what brought me here. So, but really, you know, I was like so many other guys initially inspired kind of by the Beatles and by the whole early 60s rock boom. So, you know, folk rock, all of that. I loved it all. And I was just eager to play it. So.
I thought that maybe I was going to want to do what my dad did, be a jazz player. So I went to this, I used to go around to these jam sessions in New York. So I went to this one jam session. You'd sit in and try to show people what you can do and play the upright bass. And so somebody calls out, and would call out tunes from the songbook. You know, a lot of them are Great American Songbook tunes that have been adapted by jazz artists, and they would call the jazz version of some standard. So somebody calls out Yesterday. So I'm thinking to myself, wow, this is pretty cool. They're going to play a Beatles song? And it's like, and they were like, oh, no. It's a Jerome Kern song called Yesterday. It's from 1937. Oh, I don't know that one. And then that was when I started realizing that, you know, my intellectual attachment to jazz was something that was really cool. But I had this visceral reaction and this visceral connection to blues and rock and roll and music that I kind of latched onto as an adolescent.
I had a guitar. All my friends had guitars, you know, and I was a violinist. I wish I'd stuck with it because at 13, I wasn't a bad violinist, but I went, done with the violin. I want a guitar. So, and my parents said, well, we bought you the violin, but you're going to have to buy your own guitar because we already paid for one instrument. So I mowed lawns and got an inexpensive guitar. And the rest is history.
I wound up playing in a blues band, which to me was a connection to the root of what rock and roll was all about. So then I started going on the road with this blues artist, Johnny Clyde Copeland, and I worked with him for several years during the 1980s. And I kind of cut my teeth as a musician, working on the road, learning how to play behind a vocalist, you know, and then I would investigate the playing styles of other bass players who played that music. So I got into guys like Chuck Rainey and Jerry Jamont, two bass players who I adore, who I good friends of mine now, but played on Aretha Franklin records and played on B.B. King records. And I was kind of like, those players kind of took me down a road of what I call like being a groove or a pocket player, somebody who just wants to hold down the bottom and make the song happen and make the artist shine in what they do. Because I had all this other learning behind me that I was getting from the jazz world, and I was able to try to find a way to compress that into something where I could play simpler, but with a lot of power and a lot of conviction, playing blues and soul and R&B and rock. And so that foundation was really important for me. So those early influences kind of shaped me into somebody who was really prepared when the opportunity came along to play in this house band for Conan O'Brien. I got to know Jimmy Vivino for a bunch of years, and we had played together with Johnny Johnson, a great blues piano player from Chuck Berry. And playing with him, I went back and I studied those old Chuck Berry records, and I studied Willie Dixon's bass playing style. and tried to emulate that on the electric bass. So Jimmy and I had worked together, and then when we had the opportunity to be in the band for Conan, it was interesting because all those things came into play. Listening like to Broadway soundtrack albums, movie soundtrack albums, that came into play. Knowing all these different tunes from these different genres, the Great American Songbook, and knowing all these rock and roll tunes and pop tunes from my youth, all those things, it all kind of came into play to what that band did on the show.
I can play a surf beat, you know, boom, chick, boom, chick, boom, chick. That's basically it. But I've often wanted to play the drums. I'm sure my wife is delighted I don't. And I think drums are super helpful for musicians, for a guitarist. Most of the guitarists I know who also play drums are terrific guitarists because they have the rhythm of the drums kind of ingrained in what they do. So
my brother picked up guitar in the summer of 2018, and he played all through the winter, and I've always wanted to sing. Growing up, I think I was watching the musical performance of Annie at Northern Stage, and I was just like, I wish that was me, that could be me. And I remember I even changed my name to Annie for a couple months because I was so obsessed with it. And then a couple years later, I tried to sing, and I just didn't think I sounded good because you do the thing where you record yourself singing and it sounds horrible. And you're like, oh no, I can't sing. So I was like, well, the next best thing for me to do is I could be a guitarist. So I was like, well, my brother has a guitar. He's willing to teach me a little bit. So I picked that up, and then I was like, wow, this is really, really fun. So I just kept going with it. And then through the Zoomberry choir documentary that I did, I kind of sang along with them, muted, of course, on Zoom. And I was like, wow, I actually kind of can sing. And then I did an audition at Hanover High School for their production of Godspell. And I was like, wow, I actually can sing. And that was quite a realization. So then it was like a month ago, I got actual vocal lessons, and she's like, you can sing. You aren't as bad as you think you sound. And so then I kind of went from there. I learned to play with Tuck Stocking at Tuck's Rock Dojo, and he's been my only really music coach I've ever had, and he's amazing. And then for singing, I sing with Megan Helm of NHL Studios, I think it is, and she's fabulous. She has all these different techniques that really work. There's a song for guitar and vocals that I learned. Bloody Knuckles by Sleep No Sirens was a song that came out earlier in June, and I heard it and I was like, wow, if I could play and sing this at the same time, I would be so happy. And so I can't play it because it's kind of a metal song, but I really like the energy of the song. There's this, actually, let me tune down. I can play it kind of acoustically. So the part that really intrigued me was there's this little bit, it's a reoccurring part of the song. So it's in the chorus, it's in the intro, and it's in, I think, a little bit in the verse as well, but it goes. And then it goes into just some bass, and then the song picks up again with the chorus, and then it kind of builds from there. And it doesn't sound quite right on acoustic, but with electric, I